In a previous lesson, we discussed the helpful notion of extension. Recall that the extension of a term is just a set of things that it describes. For example, the extension of the term tree is just a set of all trees. Using this notion, we have the following two definitions, allowing us to classify terms in categorical sentences. Distributed. A term is distributed if we are using it to refer to its entire extension. Undistributed. A term is not distributed or undistributed if we are using it to refer to only a part of its extension. In the following, we will look at the distribution of terms, both subjects and predicates, in each type of categorical sentence. Recall that A sentences, universal affirmatives, express that all S is P. Let's look at our earlier example. All cats are animals. In this case, we are talking about all cats. Thus, in A sentences, the subject term is always distributed. All distributes over all of the items of the subject term in A sentences. The predicate, on the other hand, is not. When we express that all cats are animals, we are saying that every single cat qualifies as an animal and that only some animals qualify as cats. Through universal affirmative sentences, we are only referring to a part of the extension of the predicate. Recall that E sentences, universal negatives, express that no S is P. From our earlier lesson, consider the sentence, no snakes are birds. Again, we are referring to the entire extension of our subject. To see this more clearly, think of the sentence as saying that, of all the snakes, none of them qualify as a bird. Then we observe that the subject term is again distributed. No distributes over all of the items of the subject term. In E sentences, so is the predicate. When we say of all the snakes that they are not birds, we also mean to say that all of the birds are not snakes either. Recall that I sentences, particular affirmatives, express that some S is P. One previous example case was some cats are albino. In this situation, neither the subject nor the predicate is distributed. In the case of the subject, this is fairly easy to see. We are using some to refer to the cats, so we are only picking out a subset of all the cats. Quite simply, some of the cats. In the case of the predicate, we are also looking at a smaller subset of all the objects that happen to fall under albino. In particular, those that also happen to be cats. Clearly, not all albino things are cats, only some of them are. Therefore, we are referring to some of the cats and to some of the albino things, so both of the terms are not distributed. Recall that O sentences, particular negatives, express some S is not P. In the previous lesson, we looked at some snakes are not poisonous as an example case. As with I sentences, some ensures that we are only talking about a subset of all the snakes, so we know that the subject is not distributed. In the case of the predicate, we're taking the relevant subset of snakes and denying it the entire set of poisonous things. In other words, the snakes we are left with after subtracting the poisonous ones are snakes about which no part of the extension of poisonous can be predicated. So the predicate is distributed. Distribution for I and O sentences can be quite confusing. Let's look at other type of examples from both in order to clear up any difficulties. Let's take a different kind of example for O sentences using some snakes are not poisonous. Suppose we have 10 snakes and 10 poisonous things in our world. Of the 10 snakes, 7 are not poisonous and 3 are poisonous. Then we have 7 non-poisonous snakes, 3 poisonous snakes, and 7 non-snake poisonous things. When we say some snakes are not poisonous, we are taking the 7 snakes that are not poisonous and subtracting them from the entire set of poisonous things, snakes or otherwise. As a final point, note that we can express A, E, I, and O sentences in many different ways in natural language. Even though their standard forms use words like all or some, the same propositions can be given through equivalent words. Here are a few examples. Every cat is an animal instead of all cats are animals. A few cats are albino instead of some cats are albino. None of the snakes are birds instead of no snake is a bird. Not all snakes are poisonous instead of some snakes are not poisonous. Asking yourself how different expressions we commonly use can be expressed in logical forms can be a helpful mechanism for logician and a useful way to practice what you learn. After having discussed each type of categorical sentence, we turn to look into one important feature of their terms, namely distribution, in order to better understand how each sentence relates the subject to the predicate. When evaluating the argument using categorical sentences as its premises, as we will do in the future, distribution can be a powerful tool to help us evaluate the truth of each sentence. It simplifies propositional content into a series of inclusions and exclusions, which is particularly easy to think about visually, too.